Hi, I am in Bill Melendez's office at his studios, and I'm with his son and a producer and director, and you've done pretty much everything in animation at this point. And now he's head of his own company in London. You pretty much run things from there, and we were just talking about some of the documentaries you're working on. But we're going to talk today a little bit about your history and your remembrances of working with your dad and of Snoopy and Peanuts and the all of the cartoons that were done that everybody loves so much. You're one of the few people, and Steve is his name, so you guys now are on a first name basis. I'm Leslie with Art Insights and, of course, Cinema Siren. So we were talking a little bit about, you're one of the few people around that actually worked on the first cartoon, on the Christmas special.
Yes, I worked on the Charlie Brown Christmas, and my dad called me up. I was still at university. My dad called me up and asked me how much money I was making at this place I was working in, and if he paid me a bit more, would I come and work for him? So I said, sure.
Of course.
And
well, that was nice of him.
That was it. So
equal opportunity for the son.
Yes, exactly.
That's
yes.
very
well,
nice.
Nepotism rules, and now my son is working for me in London.
So what did you do right from the start?
I was a gopher. I did everything. I made photocopies of stuff, and this in the days when everything was wet. And you had to run something through onto a piece of paper, and then you had to develop it, and then let it dry out. It took forever. And doing a storyboard was about 45 pages, 50 pages. It would take me half a day.
Goodness. So they did need a gopher.
Oh, yeah.
What was your impression of the cartoon itself and of what your dad was doing at the time?
Well, it was odd. I worked right from the beginning on the story with Lee and Bill and Sparky. And we sat in our office on Beverly Boulevard going through this and trying to figure out how to work in this, Linus giving this speech about Christmas.
Right.
And so I came up with a way to do it. And then they tried it, and I said, oh, that'll work, fine. And then they forgot I'd done that. That's okay.
What was it that you came up with?
No, just when Charlie Brown saying, well, doesn't anybody know what Christmas is all about? And Linus says, I do. And he goes up and gives a speech. And and what I said is, because rather than have him just say it to Charlie Brown, I said, no, have him go up on stage and turn out the lights and make it a big thing, which they did.
Right, and it is kind of one of the highlights of the entire.
Well, it worked.
Nicely done.
Yes, well, the thing is, they tried it. It was just Linus just turned to Charlie Brown and said it, and it just didn't work.
Right.
It didn't work at all.
Plus, it's a really important moment in the history of animation because it's really the first time where sort of Christian philosophy or belief was shown
Yes.
on a cartoon. So pretty important.
It was. In fact, when we did it, we didn't even think about that. It never even occurred to us that this had anything to do with it. We're just telling a story.
Because it's Christmas.
Yeah, we're just telling a story.
Right.
And it was only afterwards. It's like everything else. People tell you what you meant.
Right.
At the time, we had no idea. So we didn't plan it that way. We didn't go about it. It's like the same thing with putting the jazz track with Vince Guaraldi. We didn't know that was different or something new because we just didn't think about it.
How did that come together?
Oh, just because Lee Mendelsohn knew him in San Francisco, and just asked him, said, do you want to do music for a film? He said, sure. He said, how many yards do you want? And that was it.
And what do you think? I mean, I'm sure I'll ask Lee, but what possessed him to want to do jazz? Because they're so perfectly. I mean, it almost.
I've no idea. So you have to ask Lee that. I mean, it worked. That's all I know.
Right.
And of course, interesting thing about Vince is he couldn't read music.
Oh.
And so he would invent things, but he never wrote anything down. So it was just all out of his head.
Improvisational.
Yeah. And
well, that's partly why it's so great, probably.
And so we're doing things. We needed a certain length for things that we wanted to hit stuff. We just couldn't get him to do it. He said to my dad once, he said, just tell me how many yards do you want and I'll play. Or tell me when to stop.
Right.
That was it. They just played it, the three of them. And so it was great. But no planning, and so that none of the songs, nothing ever ended. They just went
Right.
on and on and on until it was that's enough, cut. So, and it was great. It's only, I think it was just the last song, "The Hark the Herald," is the only one that Vince didn't write.
And what was your interaction with Schulz at the time, or in the history?
On the first one, I didn't do much, but what I did is I had to take the film up to Northern California and show it to him periodically, and
the Christmas one?
Yeah.
Okay.
So he could see it.
Right.
This is before the internet and computers and anything like that.
Right.
So we bought a moviola and took it up to Schultz so he could look at the stuff. And I had to ferry the film up, and it was 3 reels is a half hour, and so there are 6 film cams. And you can't carry them on a plane; they're too heavy. So I had to drive all the way up every time. So I did this every other week.
Which is so. Where was he?
He's in is it Sebastopol up in Northern California?
Well, it's a nice drive.
He had this great place called the Coffee Grounds, which was just a gigantic place. And he had this big house. He had a baseball field.
Wow.
He had a swimming pool, tennis courts, and over the years, Joyce, his wife, developed the place. And so when he finally moved out, they had a lake, a 4-hole golf course, a studio built there, but then they had guest houses and whatnot. They had the most wonderful playroom, big, I don't know, was it hexagonal shaped building, and full of toys. Every
that's
bar
so cool.
toy you can think of was in there, from pool tables, you name it, all this junk in there, and it was great fun.
And so what was so you would go up there with the film cans and show it to him, and what was were you kind of, the first time you did it, were you kind of nervous, or have you always been kind of laid back?
No, I was just, all I did was lace the thing up on the moviola, turn it on, and he would make notes. I said, well, hang on. He'd stop it, and so it was on a counter, so I could tell. I just make notes of what he said at certain places, and then so we'd get there, and I'd have a stack of notes like that, longer than the film, all the things that were wrong. And Sparky he didn't know anything about film, and so he said, well, that's a bad drawing. Again, we went through all of that, and eventually he went down to talk to Bill about this, the bad drawings that were in the film.
Okay.
And of course, he picked out all the in-betweens. See, all the key drawings were really good. They looked just like his drawings.
Right.
But all the in-betweens didn't look anything like the characters. And so Bill handed him a scene and said, right, well, you go through there and you put the good drawings on one side and the bad drawings on the other. And so he did that. And then, so Bill said, okay, great. So, that many good drawings, that many bad drawings. So I said, right, now, you show me how to draw those. So I would never draw them like that. I can't do that. And that was the end of it. The penny dropped, and Sparky suddenly realized that he didn't know anything about animation.
Right.
But he knew about how to tell a story. So he just stuck to correcting the story and those kind of things. Or saying, no, the kids would not do that. They wouldn't do that to each other, or they wouldn't act in certain ways.
Example? Do you remember one?
Well, it's like they wouldn't hit each other.
Right.
I mean, what? It's like even when they, Lucy and Snoopy would have fights. It was always kind of bonk, poke in the nose,
or
things like that.
this, but not.
Yeah, no, they never really attacked each other.
Right.
Snoopy would, but then Snoopy wasn't a kid. And of course he would do like have a boxing glove on his nose, right? Bonk, and poke her in the nose. But they had all these things. But the kids were never violent to each other. They never touched each other in that way. I mean, Charlie Brown got hit by the baseball all the time, but the kids never had any kind of violent reactions with each other. They would just yell at each other.
Were there any kind of personality traits that he tried to, make sure stayed on a certain track or anything like that?
Well, I think originally, he didn't like the way Lucy was. He thought she was just too strident and too angry all the time.
And yet everybody loves her.
Well, yeah, but the thing is, that's the way he wrote her. That's the way it was written in the strip. And how do you interpret it differently? Eventually, he just got used to it, I think. But he didn't like it at the beginning.
Well, she's sassy, that's for sure.
Yeah, and that's just the nature of her. And she wouldn't take any kind of guff from anybody. So, which is great. She was the first feminist, I guess.
Well, except
in cartoons.
Yes.
But
she was tough.
Stuck up for herself.
Absolutely. Do you remember? Because Woodstock's my favorite. Got any good stories about Woodstock?
Well, he came along really late, after the festival, and it's a great thing about Woodstock and Snoopy is that they're cartoon characters, so you could animate them, you could do stuff with them, which you couldn't with the kids, just because of the way they're designed. You can't move them like you would normally. And I mean, if you look at their drawings, you say,
I didn't see any Woodstock ones in there, but I'm sure they're in there somewhere.
Well, I'm sure there are, but I mean, you look at their arms, you see, and their arms don't even go up to their ear.
Yes.
And so, if you wanted them to scratch the top of their head, you had to turn them away from camera, so their arm would extend, there, so they could do that. Otherwise, you couldn't do it, because they're just their proportions. They're not made for animation, and they change shape from straight on. They're one shape, and profile they're a different shape. Totally. And so so a lot of the fun was Bill working out how to animate them and how to turn them, how to make things happen. And but I say Snoopy and Woodstock are great because they're cartoon characters. And you can do anything with them.
Did you not expect everyone to have Snoopy and Woodstock be their favorite characters?
No.
I mean, it's kind of. Are they yours?
No. Well, I like them just because you can animate them, you can do stuff with them. And and the other thing is that because the comic strip is very verbal, and so you have an awful lot of talking heads. It's hard to get away from that, and you have to break it up somehow. So it was like went through this whole thing of Charlie Brown going out trying to buy a Christmas tree. He couldn't find any, not wooden ones. They were all metal or sprayed or whatever. Right. And he finally finds this little crummy tree, and brings it back, and everybody's aghast. Why don't you get a pink one or something? But so you have fun with that, just getting away from the talking heads and going out and visualizing stuff, and which is what animation's all about. So you can when you let the action tell the story rather than the kids yakking all the time.
One of the things I love most about all of the cartoons is that it's so many people all over the world have seen them, and I grew up in France, and we watched A Charlie Brown Christmas when I was a little kid, and my dad had a habit of going out Christmas Eve because he was always working too much, and there were several times where we had to actually buy what someone had cut off the top of another tree, and we took the top. And I think that I'm not alone in that there are certain aspects of not just that movie, but a bunch of them where it resonates for their own life in a way that is very personal. And that is really, I think, what makes these cartoons so have such longevity.
Well, I think the reason they have the longevity is, of course, the strip is popular, and it doesn't age. Animation tends not to, unless you make it too current. And if you make something really, about today, and you look at it a year later, it doesn't mean anything. But so, all the Peanuts films were kind of classic themes, and so you can watch them anytime, and it doesn't age on you. Because I don't know how many different voices we used on those things, but the kids we can only use for like 2 years.
So how did you get new voices? How did that work? Because they do always sound alike.
You used to audition hundreds of kids, and in L.A. and up in San Francisco, Lee would do it up there, and so a lot of the kids were schoolmates of his sons, and then a lot of them. The whole first gang we had were all down here. They were all professional kids, and we got them through agents and whatnot. But after a while, We ran out because there just weren't enough of them around. And and they grow up, and so their voice would change, so you just couldn't stick with them. But I know we had was it Chris Shea, who was the first Linus, and then his brother was the second Linus, and it just he had that funny lisp, and so we had to keep. Then we had to try and find kids with that lisp all the time, and I can't remember who was the first Peppermint Patty. But this girl had this great rough voice, and then trying to find somebody with that voice again, took a lot of casting and a lot of.
That's the mistake you make of having something really identifiable and wonderful. You then have to find somebody else who can do it.
You have to duplicate it.
Yep.
But if you listen to them, over the years the kids, their voices change, but you don't notice because the drawings stay the same. So you don't, we notice. But the average viewer, I don't think, is aware that there are different voices. So that over whatever it was, 30 years, we must have had 15 characters playing every character, different voices all the way through. And except, of course, the only one who never changed was Snoopy and Woodstock. That was Bill's voice.